is up, people? What is up, people? What is up? Let me stop. I'm a little giddy. Y'all got to excuse me because I have a very compacted day today. And part of that day is not only this stream that I'm going to do right now, that's running kind of like at an odd hour. Y'all know I normally like to get started at 11:30 a.m. Eastern or 12, you know what I'm saying, and run it all the way up until 1. But today I got some important husband duties to do that my wife has entrusted me with. And y'all know how AKA the general can be. So I got to be out of here by 12:30. Okay. So I'm going to be out of here by 12:30 as my wife has instructed me to. And we'll take care of some things with that. But so then there's this between now and 12:30. There is what I just did, which played some Pixel Junk Raiders. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to drop a formal video about my Pixel Junk Raiders experience. I'm going to call it My First Impressions. And then I'm going to do a Pixel Junk Raiders stream. We're going to make it all about the games today after this stream because I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, right? And I've been listening to people. And there was one tweet in particular. I'm going to put this out here. We are now live. We are live. Come catch the big discussion. A lot of this foolishness. When I say foolishness, I mean there's more coming from one side, but there's enough to spread around. A lot of this foolishness, and I'm not free of it either. I'm guilty of it too. But a lot of this foolishness is starting to take precedent over great games. That's the thing that I think that is most disappointing, is that there are narratives being run or people are diverting their focus, whatever side you're on. And what's being hurt are great games and great experiences. Like with all this crap a few weeks ago, we lost sight of the fact that Little Nightmares 2 launched in Stadia Pro. No additional costs. I know big time content creators that were crying, "Oh, why is this in Game Pass day one?" And Stadia Pro got it. And then now we fast forward to this week and we got Pixel Junk Raiders that is launching in Stadia Pro. And that's not predominating the talks at all. Even if some of the drama was at the top, this is nowhere near the top. It's being smothered by this rhetoric, by this drama, but it's being smothered by rhetoric that hasn't been proven. And then it's being smothered by people that are focused on this rhetoric that hasn't been proven. So like I said, there's enough blame to go on both sides, and me included. But I want to address some things because it's like a balancing act. That's the paradox that we're in, is that does an MM2K and does a Stadia Dosage say, you know what, we want to focus on the games only, and therefore we're going to ignore maybe some misconceptions or some mistruths or some illegitimate focuses. We're going to ignore it and just play the game. No, I can't do that because I get it. There's people that want to see the games because they don't have Stadia yet. But there's people that also come to this platform because they know that when they go to the mainstream media, there's a large likelihood that they're not going to get all the facts about Stadia. They're just going to get like a negative imprint of the platform. There's going to be critical facts that are left out, or they might just get some misinformation. So they come to Stadia Dosage for there to be that balance. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying all of the mainstream media, but a good portion of them, if not most, are guilty of such. We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about how our reaction to this stuff has been fraudulent, and it just keeps the egregious cycle just going. We got to break this cycle, y'all. Okay. So we're letting people know that we're live. Come join a big discussion. See, and I'm gonna put this in the Discord too. Let everybody know that we're live. Hold on one second. Give me a second, y'all. I'm gonna catch up with the chat. I don't want y'all to think I forgot about y'all. Y'all know I love y'all. Let's see here. So I'm gonna put this in here. Here. Cool right there. Give me a second, y'all. Shout out. Pretty soon I'm gonna get to the chat. I gotta forgive me. I'm sorry. All right, then we're gonna go here. We're gonna put it right here. Look at that. While I'm doing this, Stadia related, but kind of not on. Well, yeah, it is Stadia related. So I got a video out there that's going to upset some people. I want y'all to be aware of this, because I played Outriders. Me and Storm were talking. I don't know if Storm put his video out, but we did a simulcast video where we were playing Outriders, and we were both playing it on GFN. And if y'all understand my push as of late, it's not just, it ain't solely, oh, everybody's attacking Stadia, so boo-hoo on you. No, it's, look, if there's legitimate negative stuff going on with Stadia, let's talk about it. But on the same token, if there's negative, legitimate stuff going on with the other platforms, let's talk about it. So the unsuspecting gamer has a well-rounded understanding of what's going on everywhere. Everywhere. And our gameplay of Outriders demo through GFN is going to be part of that discussion. Because when we put the truth out there, when we want these entities to be better, we know what to ask for. It's not about playing some consoles or some fanboy war. Mine has more of this than yours. And it really, cloud gaming is for everybody. It's such a low barrier to entry. It's so convenient. Like, you don't have to limit yourself to one. You know, it's all about your personal preference, whatever you want to do. I'm not going to tell you how to game. You don't have to limit yourself to one, but you do what you want to do. And because of the dynamic that you don't have to limit yourself, I think that we can all agree that we want all of these to get better. Some of it is going to highlight the things that we like, and some of it is going to require us to be truthful and honest about where it falls short. And if my experience isn't your experience, that doesn't mean that my experience doesn't matter. It matters, because we need, if your experience is great with said game anywhere and mine's isn't, there's a problem. There's a gap. There's a gap somewhere, and that gap needs to be filled and fixed. So both your experience and my experience is great, especially if my experience works well with anything else. Okay. So be ready for that video. We're not going to sugarcoat anything, just like I didn't sugarcoat anything when I talk about Stadia's poor communication originally with SG&E. We're not going to sugarcoat anything when we talk about this demo. And if you're mad, get your Tylenol ready, get your Advil, whatever you need to do to reduce your headache. just have it by you in a nice glass of cold water. Okay. All right. With that said, shout out to everybody in the chat. We got Calvin Morgan in the house, senior. He says, what up, everybody? Shout out to Calvin. We got Doom Electro, Toto. What's going on? Yo. Charles Aran, hello. The Stadia Rev, he said things are completely, they are. Rev, they are. They're out of hand. You hit it right on it now. They're out of hand. Hiya from the homie Victor Del Maestro. Good to see you again. And next we go hard with the hand emoji. That got me choked up. Okay, let's get right into it. Like I said, I got to be out of here at 12:30, and I don't want this just to be a pure babble session. I want it to be about what you guys think too. And the homie Sean L is in the house. Hey, yo! All right. So before we get started, I want to say this first and foremost. I'm alluding to what Stadia Rev just said. Things are getting completely out of hand. I want to address one point of it whatsoever, so there's no mysteries. So there's no, because again, you got to, things are getting so out of hand, Rev, that you got to say this up front. because you got people within the community that'll misconstrue what you say and make it seem like you condone this stuff. So I got to put this out here just for that sake so we can squash that bibble babble. As I stated on Friday with Jason Schreier, and again, remember, I did the SLS live on Jason Schreier's reporting, and my opinion of it is, and I jive with what Clive said, Clive Linden, my spiritual advisor on all matters Stadia, that, look, I don't have a problem per se with the content within Jason Schreier's report. As much as I loathe Jason Schreier's opinions on games and the state of gaming, I think he does impeccable work. I became a Jason Schreier fan when I read Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. One of the most moving and I think integral investigative pieces and just gaming books out there. I think the best gaming book out there. Like, to get a ground floor understanding of all things gaming and why decisions are made, I urge people to get Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. It's a reflection piece, which, yeah, in hindsight, everything's 2020 in hindsight, or however the saying goes, whatever. But it's a great book to get. And I was saying that I think Jason's work was good. I don't think he did anything nefarious in the content. I just think that the context that we're going to address partially today, that, we found some bad things happening at Stadia, so that means Stadia is doomed. Stadia is dead. If you equate this to the early actions of Xbox, where Xbox over 2 generations lost $10 billion. They lost $10 billion. Why did Xbox lose it? They lost $7 billion the first generation, and they lost $3 billion the second generation with the 360. So the OG Xbox, they lost $7 billion. With the 360, they lost $3 billion. Why are they still around after losing $10 billion the first 2 generations? And this ain't from me. The numbers may differ depending on the source, and I didn't come up with these numbers. I think 3 billion was reported, or these numbers, were reported by one of the former CFOs or one of the former execs at Xbox. He wrote a book and he talked about these numbers. But they differ source to source. You go to Paul Thurrott, a big time Windows think tank, and he's told you that Xbox just started turning a profit this generation. Paul Thurrott. So why is Xbox still around? Because they were determined to stay in this game because they did not want PlayStation to fight for the living room. They didn't want PlayStation to win the fight for the living room. What was the fight for the living room? Microsoft's whole ordeal was encompassing of, and I wrote papers on Microsoft in college in the 90s, and I told y'all about that. I'm not going to get into that because we ain't got the time for it. I've studied Microsoft in and out. They wanted to ensure that their office products and everything took over your living room. And the thing that threatened that the most was the PlayStation. The PlayStation was starting to journey beyond just a gaming console with the PlayStation 3. And before the PlayStation 3 can get a stranglehold, because believe it or not, people in this industry talk. You know what I'm saying? So the ideas of the PlayStation 3, Xbox heard of a while. Like, PlayStation was working on that for a long ass time, and people at Microsoft caught wind of it, even though that we're still talking about the PlayStation 2 era when the OG Xbox came out. So they hear about this and they're like, nah, bucko, we can't let this go uncontested. So they put the Xbox, and the Xbox was supposed to be there to be that stopgap from Place or Sony taking over your living room through the multimedia entertainment aspect of it. So they were willing to lose billions of dollars as an auxiliary service to help their main service, which were its other Windows products to help take over your living room. Right? That's before the advent of the cloud and what cloud technology can do and all that other great stuff, right? So you fast forward to now. Satya Nadella takes over. Satya Nadella is the cloud guy for Microsoft. He takes over because the company as a whole sees that cloud technology is where the computing and the aspects of this type of business is going into. It's going to be large. It's going to be bigger than ever based upon cloud technology. So Satya Nadella goes around again. I'm not pulling this out of my rear end. This is coming from Paul Thurrott, head of a major think tank in relation to Windows. He goes around and he goes to everybody and he says, look, why should you exist? Why should you exist in this new cloud culture that's going to be part of Microsoft? And all the business lines had to do that. And I went through something like that myself. And I know it's true. As a manager of managers at a Fortune 500 company, number one in our industry, there was a merger, so to speak, of our companies. And new leadership followed. And I remember, and you're talking about an era, when you talk about 2010 and beyond in white collar work or the business culture, Fortune 5, managing became a lot more bold in dissecting you and your abilities and how they portrayed that. So just like how Paul Thurrott had said that Satya Nadella went and asked people why they should exist, I experienced the same thing. The VPs that were in charge came to me and said, yo, MM2K, why should your business lines exist? Why should your contingency plans exist? Tell me, why should you be here? And I had to come up with reasons, sit with my direct reports, and come up with reasons on why we could fit the new culture of the company once this merger occurred. So that was just customary. I experienced my situation closer to 2010. Satya Nadella took over in 2013 and started going to business line experiencing that. So that's why I concur with everything that was being said. I went through it myself. So fast forward, Satya Nadella takes the Microsoft business where under Steve Ballmer, we were happier with the output of Xbox games, even though the Kinect, was like a bad move. But again, games like Rise and Dead Rising and things like that, Sunset Overdrive, they were more appealing to the atypical Xbox gamer than some of the stuff that you may see now, right? Hence the moniker Xbox ain't got no games. That's why you hear that. But with that being said, we were happier, but they were bleeding so much money to make that happen. And businesses had to become leaner and meaner. And that's what Satya Nadella was all about. And that's why he was so instrumental in Minecraft being acquired. Harmonix becoming a major, business line that they distribute. I mean, not Harmonix. What is that? Havoc. Not Harmonix. I'm sorry. Havoc, the Havoc engine being being an instrumental thing that they license and so forth. And you take a business that was losing $10 billion and now in a year when Sony had its biggest year ever in its 24-year history in 2018 with games like God of War kicking it off, and then Spider-Man capping it off. And years like that, where Sony made $16 billion, Microsoft, even though being monikered as not having any games, people were making fun. I mean, we were doing on Broadband Bullies, the Xbox One X launching with Zoo Tycoon and Disney Rush and Phantom Dust with the original assets. In that year, they still made $10 billion to Sony's $16 billion. Just in 1 year. So in 1 year, all that loss that Microsoft incurred, they washed away. So you fast forward to now where Amazon, now the head of Amazon is a cloud guy like Satya Nadella. Now, what has that got to do with Google? Google its biggest competitors are Microsoft and Amazon. I know Google makes a lot of money in other things, and they like dibble dabbling and jumping in and jumping out and playing hopscotch and a lot of other things. But market-wise, when people look at Google's success, they look at what their revenues are in comparison to Microsoft and Amazon. That's the way the market looks at them in a lot of ways. So a lot of their standing, a lot of their value is based upon how well they're performing versus Microsoft and Amazon. And where you have a situation where Microsoft's cloud and its gaming business is doing well, Amazon's cloud and its gaming business is, has potential. Google has a fairly decent cloud network, but it lost $5 billion year over year or something like that. And the board really wants that cloud technology to get better and get more competitive. So now they have Stadia where, people are talking about white labeling, but Amazon's doing something different where, we're going to give you access to our cloud technology via you just porting your games over to us. That should be successful, right? So if Amazon's going to do it, and that's not white labeling, so if Amazon's going to do it, why can't Stadia do it? That keeps their cloud technology also on the forefront and the gaming technology on the forefront if it's successful. That kills two birds with one stone, just like how it does with Amazon. So Google, in no way, shape, or form, under just a year can afford, or a year or two, or even 3, can really afford to be competitive and completely abandon gaming. Especially when Microsoft has a good foothold in gaming and Amazon has so much promise in gaming. That's why you've heard them say over time after time, we're committed to this. We're committed to this, to gaming as a whole, not just SG&E, which again, there was a lot of promise there, but the fruit of the labor, most of the talk wasn't about SG&E. It was just simply providing you games in a convenient way that showcases the tech. So if you have nothing concrete, journalists, that combats that, what the community's question is to you is, how do you write all these doom and gloom stories when they're just regurgitation of stuff that we already knew? And even Jason Schreier doesn't have anything conclusive that they are abandoning providing you games. See, that's a false man's errand as far as running with that mantra if you're not staying on top of the news. If you stayed on top of the news, you realize that Jade Raymond even told you their Breath of the Wild, their big games, their big ticket titles weren't coming for 4 or 5 years. Before you get to the 4 or 5 year mark, Stadia has to get you on the games that are coming out now. You don't even get to the 4 or 5 year mark if people aren't picking up your games now. Am I right or am I wrong? So if that's the case, and Stadia is saying, look, we would have loved to show you the apex of this technology 4 or 5 years from now, but we got to reassure what's going on now. And there's a way we can definitely do a lot better now. We've seen it with Cyberpunk. We've seen it in data after. We see it in polls when we ask people, what's keeping you from Stadia? You ain't got my favorite games. It's not, oh, you ain't got exclusive. Poll after poll tells you, and these are all public, so I don't get to disconnect, that the biggest thing that people ask for on Stadia is to get their Call of Duties. Every time there's an interview, when are y'all getting Call of Duty? I was just rewatching the interview where Jack Buser did in November. I forgot the name of the outlet. But the question kept surrounding around, when are y'all getting Call of Duty? When are y'all getting Apex Legends? When you getting this? When you getting that? Those are the questions that are being asked now. Not about Project Chimera. People wanted to see that stuff. But the more immediate question is, when are you getting these big ticket AAA multi-plat games now? So if SG&E is not tied to that, the immediate future, and they close down SG&E, how does that spell doom and gloom? What people can arguably surmise from that, without evidence, without the proper evidence, I want to say, what people can fathomably surmise from that is, okay, maybe Stadia isn't going to be as promising as we thought it was going to be. Maybe it's not as going to be as nuanced and unique. So I can see, arguing the value of the product in the long run. I get those arguments. But if the overwhelming immediate need for the product is getting games like what you see here, more of them, day and date, AAA, on the platform now, how does SG&E, an untethered project, or an untethered effort, rather, excuse me, how does the closure of that spell doom and gloom for, again, something completely untethered? Now it's you guys trying to make that case. But it's like you're putting the carriage before the horse. It's like you're trying, with 1,000 cuts, you're trying to force that narrative. We need the conclusive proof from the journalists that if your headline is going to read definitively, Stadia's demise, Stadia is closing, the days are just numbered. If those are going to be your headlines, you need to show us conclusive proof that their ability to bring these AAA games to us are being scaled back. They're abandoning that. Until you can prove that, regurgitating the same information with all these off-the-wall headlines is at the center of the ire. You can't be void of that, journalists. You can't be void of that. In your opinion, Stadia might be done, and that's where you do op-eds. But you're writing journalistic news or something that's looking like news, straight up news and facts, with the narrative that has yet to be proven. Again, more imperative. Would you not agree? More imperative to Stadia's survival would be them getting gamers on the platform now. Like if 4 or 5 years, let me put it to you like this. If 4 or 5 years go down, and let's just say SG&E doesn't close. Let me give you two scenarios. That's why I said it's good to think, it's good to just not be ready to put out articles, clickbait, or whatever, and put your opinion as fact. Sometimes you got to just sit back. I got me some tea. You hear that? Some nice little tea. Take some tea, take a sip. Sit back, slow your thought process, and think things through. Let me give you two scenarios. Scenario number one, news journalist, is Stadia doesn't close down SG&E. And they do well between now and when their first like, serious exclusive come out. Say that their first exclusive, big ticket exclusive, they spend $300 million on that exclusive. But they do well. They got Call of Duty. They got all the AAA games dropping the same date as they are on PlayStation and Xbox. But then their first multi-$100 million game comes out. Let's just say it's called Chimera Fight or whatever, right? Got all the bells and whistles for Stadia, features and all that, and it releases. And guess what? It's a dud. It's a dud. Stadia is more likely to, even though that game is a dud, Stadia is more likely to still remain open, right? Why? Because they're getting the Call of Duties, the Fortnites, they got them on day and date. And they're getting all that DLC money and all that, that Apex Legends money from whatever the case may be. That's what Microsoft survived off of, in most part, when they were having their horrible years with the Xbox One. And that year was Sony made $16 billion and Microsoft made $10 billion. A lot of that was that Fortnite, that third-party money. If you get all these AAA third parties and your platform is a fathomable place to play those games and people are buying the DLC and stuff on it, you're set. You're in a good place. You can survive. So in that scenario, just like when Xbox was having dud after dud after dud, they were able to survive and really still bring in $10 billion. Because they had those third-party games day and date. For the most part, there was the Minecraft money, but for the most part, it was having those third-party games day and date, particularly Fortnite, that helped keep things afloat or impressive, even though they really didn't have the catalog to impress people with. So in scenario A, Stadia still survives. Anybody would still survive with that third-party support. Here goes scenario B. Let's say Stadia doesn't close SG&E again, but those 4 years, they don't really get those AAA games. They don't get the Call of Duties and the Apex Legends. And they continue on pace, and they put all their chips in these unproven AAA games that people aren't guaranteed to like just because they spent a whole bunch of money on it. And again, the game comes out, the Chimera Fight comes out, and again, it's a flop. What do you think happens to Stadia then? What do you think happens to Stadia then? Without the AAA support from the multiplats, the same thing that kept Xbox afloat when they didn't have the catalog, if Stadia doesn't have that in its back pocket and the game flops, they definitely are out. So again, journalists and everybody that don't have the conclusive proof, but want to swear to the Dickens that Stadia is closing down because they closed down SG&E. I remind you that even in a year where Xbox did not have, where they still don't have the first party catalog. You got David Jaffe out here, he getting blocked by Phil Spencer for crying out loud because he's calling out that they launched a new console without any AAA game. Xbox still ain't got the catalog yet. It's coming, apparently, by Bethesda and whoever, but it's not here yet. How are they staying afloat? Because people want to play their AAA games on the platform. And why can't it be feasibly understood that maybe what Stadia did is they looked at what Amazon was doing and said, okay, we tried to follow that route and it ain't working too good on them, and we ain't gonna write just blank checks everywhere like they do. And they looked at what Microsoft is doing. Oh, Microsoft bought their studios. The only studio that they built from the ground up was the Initiative. They bought their studios. Their studios were already proven, and then they absorbed those studios. Even Bungie. Bungie was already together when they absorbed Bungie. Microsoft bought their studios. Maybe when the time is right for us, we need to do the same. So again, all of that is subjective. We don't know what's going on. But just like I can't prove it, you have failed at proving your part. All you've done is just put out there 1,000 different cuts of different little things to make it look bad and then throw this headline on there that, hey, the days are just numbered. So us, the community that knows better, looks at that and says, y'all ain't on y'all job. What about this, and this? Ain't nothing wrong with after you drop your article about Pixel Junk Raiders, you say, okay, well, and then, at the end of all the articles, they talk about the most recent news with Stadia or with said product. There ain't nothing wrong with you saying, okay, Pixel Junk Raiders is coming out. Yeah, Stadia is having a rough time in recent news. There was this about the Q&A. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm talking about these op-ed summaries that are embedded in reports that are just supposed to be about the facts. Get your conjecture out of reports that are supposed to be about straight facts. Because you're not getting the facts right all the time. But that was supposed to be my opening statement, y'all. I went well up. But yes, we don't condone telling people that their life is in danger because you don't like their opinion. We need to stop that. All right. So let's talk about this real quick. First, I saw something in the chat. Twisted Barber. The gaming industry is worth over $100 billion. If you believe that Google doesn't want a piece of that pie, then you need your head a wobble. And Jason Schreier crying about, why are they spending $10 for a port, $10 million for a port? I'd rather them, a lot of us would rather them use 300 million. Let's do the math. Let's do the math. Let's pull the calculator out. So your average game is anywhere between 150 million to 300 million to produce and market. Your average AAA blockbuster game right now, 150 million. You go anywhere between 150 million, sometimes even 500 million, right? Halo Infinite is being rumored to be around 500 million. But let's go with let's go with something in between. Let's go with 250 million. All right. Let me add the zeros in there too. So if you divide 250 million by 20 million, you get 12 and a half games. That 250 million. I'd rather Google buy 12 to 13 proven games with that 250 million than to spend it on one AAA title effort that's not guaranteed, that is not proven. Do you hear me? Let me say it again for the people in the back, for the journalists in the back. I'd rather Google spend 250 million and give me 12 proven AAA games day and date than to spend all that and get it to me ASAP within 1 year than for me to, for that 250 million to just be sitting there being absorbed because you're working on, say, a AAA game that I'm not going to see for 4 or 5 years. And when I do see it, there's no guarantee that I'm going to like it. So my homie Twisted Barber gets it. I just don't know why the game journalists don't get it. Look, and when I say get it, I don't mean you got to agree with it. But if you're looking at everything from 5,000 feet, your headlines would be a lot more level. And your conjecture, you would but it should never be in a straight report. Anyway, it should be separated. But your conjecture, you would say, okay, let's balance it out a little bit. Because this does make sense. I'd rather get Call of Duty, Apex Legends, the other Call of Duty, Fortnite, all these other AAA, Rogue Company, all these other big ticket games, Overwatch, whatever. I'd rather see 12 of them in a year, this year, than Google to sit on that 250 million for an effort 5 years from now that I'm not guaranteed to like. That doesn't make sense for y'all to be arguing like this is doom and gloom when this is the more fathomable approach for a new company. Even Microsoft, when they first started, they didn't build their AAA efforts from the ground up. Maybe the sports, but that's it. But that's different. And the sports wasn't knocking it out of the park either. But your AAA action games, your best bet is to pay somebody else to bring them to your platform so people can say, hey, look, they're here too. I bet you instead of losing $7 billion the first generation, Xbox wish they could have given $20 million a game to get those games ported over to Xbox that were all on PlayStation. They wouldn't have lost 24 million to 150 million. So again, you ain't got to agree with it, but you should be able to see it, and it should have more influence on these crazy behind headlines that you guys got out here. That's why the community is coming at your throats. Because you're siloed and looking at this. Again, your opinion is your opinion, but you're trying to add conjecture into old news to make your opinion fact when you're not looking at everything in totality, and there's other avenues here that make a whole bunch of sense that you're just completely ignoring for whatever reason. Thank you, Twisted Barber, for that. For those words of wisdom. So the history again. Several stories that have focused so much on Stadia are causing unrest with the community. Not all, but the majority speak in absolutes and try to sell this ambiance that Stadia is shutting down any moment, despite the company specifically saying that Stadia retail is not going away. The community asked for Stadia to push back, and finally Stadia did, and now journalists are pushing back. But all this speaks to a tone deafness that needs address. Now, how do we get here? Since the launch of the platform, just like how I described, but since the launch of the platform, the misinformation about Stadia, while dogging it out, has been short of egregious. Most of the stuff that people are saying negative, most of the people that have had negative stuff to say about Stadia have not tried the service or have not set it up properly. And even after being told you did XYZ wrong, they still refuse to go back and fix whatever settings were messed up. Or they want to make excuses for it. Oh, I couldn't use a workplace VPN for this? No, dummy, no! And I'm sorry, no! Yet, despite their lack of experience or proper tweaking with the correct settings in the infrastructure, they are piggybacking off of other journalists' subjective work. This lack of accuracy and the constant blurring of fact-telling and op-eds has been the main ire of the Stadia community with journalists. Now, we've seen this all up until fourth quarter of last year. After fourth quarter, 2020, Stadia seemed to be on an uptick as far as this activity and what it was offering the community. They had the successful marketing campaign with Austin Creed, remember the wrestler and so forth, and the campaign you see on the screen at first didn't go over well, but it had some impact. Then you had the YouTube premium members that were given Stadia Premier bundles, and those ran out. So think about it this way, y'all. So Jason Schreier reports only that a bunch of controllers that were made weren't sold, like in the twos of hundreds of thousands, right? He reports that that's what happened. And earlier on, at launch, you got to look at stuff specifically. He says specifically at launch. Now, he also alludes to that in response to these controllers that they thought they were going to sell were being given away. He doesn't say in what effort they were given away, who they were given away. He just says they were given away. And I just find that a little peculiar. A man staunch on details. When somebody that's staunch on details doesn't give you details on something, it's because they're trying to form your opinion around it subjectively. Like, it kind of reminds me of when Kotaku said that, oh, and Bethesda was cited for the reason why Stadia closed, one of the reasons why Stadia closed SG&E. Why? Are you trying to tell me that Phil Harrison cited Bethesda, he didn't explain why, or someone didn't ask why, and there wasn't a comment to that? Where is that, Kotaku? The fact that that's out of your reporting when I know it exists, a response from somebody that said why or an explanation why exists, and the fact that that's not in your reporting speaks volumes. I hear reporters say, I've heard reporters that they say, I don't know why the Stadia community can't read between the lines. You fail to read between the lines with stuff like that. Somebody in that Q&A had to say, hold on, what is Bethesda being bought by Microsoft got to do with us building our own games? And there had to be an answer. And the simple fact that both of those pieces are missing from Kotaku's report says a lot. Right? So, back to Jason Schreier. Again, I don't think he was doing anything nefarious, but I think some things were done with some liberty. You know what I'm saying? Like, he doesn't tell you which specific campaign these extra controllers were quote unquote given away at. But I'm going to play let's play hypothetical king here, like some of our journalist friends do sometimes. Not all, but some of them. Let's assume that those extra controllers were then earmarked for the YouTube Premium effort, where Google went to its YouTube Premium members and said, yo, we're going to give you controllers for being a YouTube Premium member, or for the Cyberpunk 2077 effort, we're going to give you controllers if you buy Cyberpunk on this platform. Guess what? Those campaigns were successful because guess what? They ran out of supply within a week. That's the part that Jason Schreier doesn't tell you about. All that supply that was given away was gone in weeks. Oh, we're sorry. We got to cut this campaign short early. Or we're sorry, Canada, after 48 hours, we've given away all the control. There was a monetary attachment to all this. You had to be a YouTube Premium member, or you had to buy Cyberpunk 2070. So these were all attached to monetary gains for the company. They didn't just go on Wall Street and just throw up a bunch of controllers in the air and say, here. There had to be some type of monetary sacrifice in order to participate in said giveaway. Particularly the Cyberpunk 2077. They knew after the YouTube Premium effort that the Cyberpunk effort could be run through the supply even more quickly. So what did they do? They had to take Cyberpunk offline for what I fathom is to see who pre-ordered it before this initiative and see if they had enough controllers for those people first, and then announce the initiative. And after they said, okay, for the people that have already pre-ordered Cyberpunk, we do got enough controllers for them. Now we can give out some more controllers. Then they brought Cyberpunk back up. Nobody talks about that entire supply is gone. So with that being the fact that at launch, they may have missed targets. We've said that here. If you believe that Stadia sold as many Premier bundles as they wanted to at launch, you're fooling yourself. We said that since the very beginning. Why? Because entities like Jason Schreier already told us that at launch. He already said, my inside information tells me that Stadia fell short of his projected goals at launch. He already said that. So he already knew that they were hundreds. He knew that. He ain't just uncovered that. He knew that from the very damn beginning. He just threw that in there, again, to add more weight to the fact that he did all of this investigating and really couldn't unearth anything substantially new. But again, the media isn't talking about the fact that those controllers, when given away, they were given away as part of major campaigns, and they're all gone. They're all depleted. Then, on top of that nobody in the media wants to talk about. Again, you can still do your little conjecture and blur the lines, but you're not putting everything out there. You're forcing yourselves to tell only one story, and us that are in the know, we're sick of it. Then on top of that, Family Share, once it was released, it saw your friends list go up 1,000%. People went from 30 friends being online at a time to 300 friends being online at a time. I remember when Tom Warren was talking his trash, and then people said, yo, Tom Warren, you don't think there's 100 Stadia players at one time? Boop-bop, boop-bop, boop-bop. And he had to backtrack, or nobody can take a joke. And last but not least, not just as we're going to give you a premiere bundle with the Cyberpunk deal, but the fact that when Cyberpunk released, and the biggest brick and mortar that had Stadia controllers in it, they were sold out for almost a month. 3 weeks. They were sold out of Stadia controllers when Cyberpunk came out, which was Best Buy. Best Buy had the premiere bundles. People wanted to play Cyberpunk because it was god-awful on their consoles, or it wasn't up to par. They heard all this good stuff about Stadia, or they seen it, and they wanted to go pick it up, and they were going to Best Buy's, and they depleted the stock at Best Buy. They couldn't restock for 3 weeks. And none of this reporting do y'all talk about that. Y'all talk about old stuff that happened before fourth quarter. Y'all talk about first, second, and third quarter stuff. Y'all don't want to talk about the more recent stuff that happened. The only recent thing y'all want to talk about is SG&E closing down, which again, wasn't coming to fruition for 4 to 5 years from now. In the immediate now, Stadia got to get AAA games on there. So on the heels of quarter one, with the disappointment console sales, I'm going to bring it on home. This is why I think this is happening. Stadia seemed to rise further. Why do I say that? Let me show you something. That's why I say all of our journalistic friends aren't hanging in the cuckoo's nest. Some of them get it. They let me put this over here. Golly, why can't I put this over here? Okay. So this right here is from Eric Kane of Forbes. He says the best next-gen video game console isn't the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X. This is just January 14th, 2021. So on the heels of people complaining, look, man, I like my PlayStation 5. I love the DualSense controller, but this thing keeps shutting down on me. Or, damn, I like what Xbox is proposing, but they came out with no damn games. And it's really, none of these consoles are really offering anything that warrants $500. With that becoming the buzz more and more and more. You had articles like this from Eric Kane. I have to admit, I didn't really expect to be saying this, but Google Stadia is the most next-gen console on the market. When I first reviewed Google, it was a mixed bag at best. Now, as I survey my lineup of expensive storage-confined next-gen, okay, current gen now, systems, I can't help but see it. Stadia is by far the most next-gen of the bunch. It was surprisingly great with Cyberpunk 2077 that compound this realization, though I'd been dabbling more and more with Stadia before that, including a remarkably good-looking, well-performing Destiny 2. As I've noted elsewhere, Stadia is quite possibly the best place to play Cyberpunk 2077, even if it's not as rich as an experience as a high-end gaming PC. The game still actually runs the best and looks nearly as good on Stadia. It's leaps and bounds better than PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X, where a last generation version of the game is running on new hardware. That was just January 14th, people. The way the news media is compounding all this stuff, you would think that only 3 people bought Cyberpunk. Stadia had no successful campaigns recently. That they were getting no buzz, that everything was just kept going downhill, that they weren't on an uphill trend. That's what they want you to believe. And that's the problem that the community that knows better is looking at, that is at the center of the ire. Now, when SG&E closed, did Stadia mishandle the rollout message? Yes, they did. And I'm gonna say this, and not to say this against anybody. I don't think I'm the best out here, but I think I was one of the most vocal people about it. I did like 4-5 podcasts every damn day talking about it. On how they bungled that messaging. I was everywhere talking about it. But they later better clarified. And the onslaught of articles that follows appearing to stifle any rebound for the platform by talking absolutes as if it's closing shop, despite numerous statements of it not going anywhere. Them stating that they're releasing 100 more games in 2021. New YouTube positions related to retail Stadia popping up. The most recent one is a project manager for handling Stadia features. Articles also speaking to retail Stadia that people ignore. The Input Magazine article that we keep bringing up. That offer good authority. The focus was on the product, which is the focus is on right now. Post SG&E, even though that was a pre-SG&E article, it was given by the spokesperson that would have been abreast of what was going on with SG&E beforehand. And that was the refocus of their talks. They mentioned nothing about SG&E. There was a reason for that. And they're talking about the features just like how Stadia is talking about features and third-party integration right now. But nobody talks about that article. It came out February 1st. Everybody missed it. Input Magazine, look it up. And the fact that games are still being certified for the platform with a post-2021 release date. Sky climbers. The community is at its wit's end with this hashtag Stadia do rhetoric without concrete proof. And some of the best that are exemplifying this well beyond myself, better than I ever could, are my good brothers Clive Linden and my homie Brian Chappelle in the Nerf Report. And finally, Stadia pushback against VGC. But with that said, this is where the tone deafness comes in. Even though I see what point VGC is trying to make here, they're tone deaf in their response. Take a look at this. Yesterday, I didn't even know that Stadia fanboys were a thing. Today, I'm getting sent personal threats from them. Now, we've already spoken to the threats. That's unacceptable. But you got this threat from this one person, and you want to demean the whole community? Yesterday, I didn't know Stadia fanboys were a thing. That right there is not something to brag about. So I commented, I said, threats towards someone's safety are abhorrent. However, it's the sideways deprecating parts of comments like these that make journalists as adored as lawmakers these days. Way to go to men-tensions. So you want everybody to sympathize with you and your bite, but you attack the whole community. Because in that sideways, I didn't know Stadia fanboys were the. If there is a consumer base, if there's a fan base with any product or service, there are going to be fanboys. There are fanboys over Pepsi versus Coke. There are fanboys over goddamn barbecue sauce. So Andy Robinson, who I invited to this, if you stayed past all my yelling and screaming, I want you to understand the tone deafness in that response. If you're trying to respond to a community and say, hey, look, I get you got a beef with something, but that beef ain't here with me, that's not how you go about it. And another thing that I would like to address too is this notion, also from homie from VGC, that he said, look, everybody's calling me a liar. And, this, that, and the other. And he brings up a fathomably reasonable explanation of events. I'm not going to wholeheartedly doubt him. We don't know. See, I don't do what y'all do. I don't sit there because I have a certain notion, say, no, this is absolutely what you did, unless I have conclusive proof. I'm about to talk about that conclusive proof. That's why I asked the homie Ben Shoon, because he wanted to chime in on this. I asked the homie Ben Shoon to join us as well. I'm going to talk about that conclusive proof. But he gives a reasonably fathomable argument. He says, look, when Stadia addressed specifically the part where I said there were talks about the Kojima game and something else. Number one, I never said that there was a deal made. And number two, they never specifically contested anything else. And to those points, I say those are fathomable points. But if we're having a full-fledged, well-rounded discussion, I want to point to Exhibit B. Based upon my Fortune 500 experience having to deal with PR. Because local news got a wind of something and they want to call. We talk to your phone representatives and it feels like that you're giving so-and-so the runaround and this is going to be on our next expose. So as a manager that oversaw that area, I would have to sit with our PR team, with legal on the phone sometimes, and our section manager, and strategize how we're going to do this. This isn't anything, excuse my French, that I'm pulling out of my ass. I want to give our good friend Andy and Ben and anybody else that want to say that what Andy said is 1,000% correct. I want to let y'all know that it's a great point. It could be correct, but it's not 1,000% correct. And I'm giving you some experience on the Fortune 500 side that you all apparently don't have. I say here there's a misconception brewing from a journalist standpoint. That is, Stadia only specifically mentioned XYZ, so the rest must be accurate. From a Fortune 500 standard of less is best, the strategy is you attack the entire article by saying it was inaccurate and reported hearsay. That was their attack. And you only point to the most inaccurate entry. It doesn't mean that everything else is 100% spot on. For instance, because PR, when it comes to Fortune 500 legal and PR, the strategy is less is best. If you can answer a question or address the situation with saying the least amount of words possible and persuade mind share with the least amount of words possible without creating more, a rebuttal, then that's what you do. And the point to attack that would best suit that need would be the Kojima thing. It doesn't mean that everything else with VGC was correct. It could be. Doesn't necessarily mean it. It just means that we can get in there, throw in our jab, address something, and get out. We used to do it all the time. We would get local news that would send us 10 bullet points, and we would say, what is the best thesis that we can provide to shred said statement or article to pieces, and let's pull out the most poignant thing that we can hammer on. They don't go bullet from bullet to bullet because that causes rebuttal questions that PR and stuff don't want to get into. So don't think, again, for those of you that are ignorant to this process that happens from the Fortune 500 aspect, Don't think just because certain things weren't addressed that makes them right. You got to remember, and Alex Hutchinson said it himself when asked recently on Twitter. Alex Hutchinson, formerly of SG&E, which is Typhoon, we was absorbed through Typhoon Studios that made Journey to the Savage Planet. He said, look, there are NDAs around these games that were made by Google, which means not only can't they talk about it, but legal is advising Google entities for them to talk about it as least as possible. And being that this Kojima game never existed and is not a Google property, it doesn't fall under said NDA because it never existed. Or there weren't talks about it. Now, there are some games that VGC said that they mentioned in their article that could have went that exactly how they said. Maybe they went 25% of the way that they said. Maybe they went 0% of the way that they said. But true or not, you're not going to get Google to sit down and thoroughly, well, this game right here never existed. This game did exist. They're not going to do that from a Fortune 500 standpoint. They're not going to sit there and say, well, VGC, see, you were only 5% right here. Yes, we were working on a game with the former Assassin's Creed boss, but it was only it was a Pac-Man copy. They're not going to go through those details with you. They pulled out the thing that they feel like they could hammer the most. They hammered on it, and it got the result that they wanted. The Stadia community is happy, and now they're calling you liars. So it is what it is. Y'all play dirty, they play dirty back. For as much as y'all said, as much as Ben Shun told me that even though he didn't vet the information that was from Kotaku, that it warranted him to change the title of his story, even though after the fact it was found out that that information wasn't factual, that Stadia had nobody around to fix it. He told me specifically on Twitter they deserved it. Well, Google sat there in their lobbies Sunday morning and said, well, y'all deserve it. Simple as that. So where do we go from here? Because I got to get ready to get out of here. I got really 2 minutes. Where do we go from here? I'll tell you as soon as this damn thing stop cutting up. Number one, for the Stadia community, we got to be honest. Stadia community, you got to come to grips with the fact that these articles are not going to stop. They're not. Why? Well, for one, this is not the bread and butter, but the click and butter for many of these journalists right now. A lot of them, I do tracking. I can't tell you how, but I do tracking of everything that comes out in regards to this platform. And the overwhelming majority of the articles, I want to say a good 80% of them. I'm not saying every, but 80% of the articles that are derived from what's being reported by a Kotaku or VGC. Well, I'm not going to doubt I'm not going to doubt VGC did some vetting or did some report. I'm not going to doubt that at all. Kotaku, I'm not going to doubt that they did no research. A lot of their stuff is wrong. Even their peer, 9 to 5 Google said it was wrong, which it still bewilders me why they would even cite them and make an article change based off of their crap. But I'm not going to say they didn't do any research. But there are entities that see these reports and all they basically do is just rewrite them up. They just change some words and they rewrite them up, and then they go look for some old information, some subjective information to drive the point home, and then they write it up. They do no validation. They're regurgitate. So therefore, and that's 90% of the articles that you see out there. So they see what VGC put out there and they just regurgitate it and don't add anything else new to it. They just regurgitate it. And the Stadia click hate seems like it must be more profitable or more worth the while more than ever, because I'm seeing an uptick in articles like I've never seen before. Granted, I wasn't tracking articles at launch. I've been tracking articles since March. And I'm telling you, I've yet to see an uptick like how I'm seeing now. So it must be lucrative at some point. Or it must be a lot more lucrative at some point. Secondly, some of these articles do have some journalistic value. Not all of them. Hardly any of them more recently. But some do have journalistic value. So it's okay if somebody got something negative to report on Stadia. If it's true, let it be told. That informs you, the gamer, the most. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that when it seems like it's a concentrated effort and they're only telling half of the story, doesn't become a problem. But if someone just happens to have a story that happens not to be so positive about Stadia, it's not the end of the world. And even though I don't agree with Jason Schreier's take that, oh, yeah, Stadia should be doing a whole bunch of Stardew Valleys instead of bringing us 12 AAA games, instead of wasting money on making a AAA game themselves that they ain't gonna like. I mean, that we may not like, excuse me. So that's that. With that said, journalist, here's my message to you. You suck at dealing with these issues. You suck at conflict resolution. Can I put this back up on the screen? I want to put this back up on the screen. Let me do it this way. I want to put this back on the screen to drive my point home. Yesterday, I didn't know Stadia fanboys were a thing. That's not something to brag about. Andy, that proves that if you're not joking, which you are, you're making a deprecating joke, which again, does not mend the situation at all. It's horrible conflict resolution. But if you were serious, that means that you sit there and do all this writing about a platform and you don't even understand its consumer base. If anybody does their homework on Stadia, they know that there is a well-oiled community that does things like Stadia Super Saturday, now 72 straight hours, with 30 different content creators of Stadia content, which is the grandfather to the Stadia Bears network right now. You know what I'm saying? Hosted by Cowboy and your homie Ray Sherrod. There are outlets like Stadia Source and Cloudy with a Chance at Games that was brought to birth because of this community. And so many other initiatives. Plenty of great content creators. Generation Stadia, Nerd Nest, Clive Linden, my homie Brian Chappelle in the Nerf Report, Sunny Cloud Gaming at over 10,000 subscribers, and so on and so on. If you would have done your homework, you would know about these entities. You don't know because you ain't done your damn research. My question before I go, because I got to go, and I wanted to give you guys time, but my question before I go is this is a reflection on the community. They want to push back on us. And again, opposite of anybody that is harassing somebody or threatening their life, or making threats in general. Opposite of those are weirdos that ain't got nothing to do with us that are talking to you now. Opposite of those weirdos, we got a question for you. How do such people who get paid to put together the right words to convey a point be so horrible at doing so to de-escalate situations that are easy to mend? Not only do we have tweets like this, But then we had the barrage of tweets from Ben Shoon. That Ben comes in my chat. I say, Ben, you can come on the show. We can have a cool discussion. Now, we ain't going to have in quotes, a civil discussion, trying to belittle me and my ability to have a civil discussion with him, but sit there and attack the community. Yeah, just stay and then go on subtweeting about us. Yeah, well, this article is going to make the Stadia community mad. Just continue on and on. Y'all get paid to put words together to convey a point to get to a certain end to a means. How are y'all so horrible at conflict resolution? You're horrible at it. You suck. That's not a reflection on us that are sick and tired of the onslaught of articles that are incorrect, that only look at half the information, that caveat the information. That's not a reflection on us. Even if you do get caught up in that whirlwind of rebuttal, this is easy to mend. Hey, look, we get it, Stadia community. We get that there might be situations out there where people don't properly cover, said facet of Stadia, and they're trying to do X, Y, Z. We assure you that's not us. We got to be honest with you. We are not a Stadia cheerleading such and such, but we also can sympathize where you're coming from. But that is not us. We got to do our jobs and we got to report our stories. That would go so much farther than the BS that you guys continue to do. So I'll leave you with this. Are the responses that you're getting from the Stadia community because of this crap that you guys want to say after the fact, is that a reflection on us or a reflection on you and your inability to use those words that you get paid for to come to a fathomable solution? It's as easy as pie. I just sit there and say, look, I get where y'all coming from, but this is not what we're doing now. We totally sympathize and we agree. Some of these articles could have been better written as far as the facts, but you got to trust us. We are on the facts. You're going to get some people that you ain't going to satisfy anybody, but you'll gain and garner the respect of the community, not the bull crap that you put out there. So again, I got to go because my wife is going to kick my ass. But my message to the journalist community, if your aim is not, understand where the Stadia community is at. And I understand why they're there. And yes, they should exercise more caution. But you also got to sympathize. Again, I've never seen this. In the years and years that I've been covering games, I've never seen this onslaught of misinformation. And just caveating the facts. You would think that Stadia had the worst fourth quarter, that they just weren't on an uptick the way y'all are talking right now. They're sick of it. And sometimes people do get caught in the crossfire. But there's a better way to handle this. If you see a shootout happening and you're like, oh my goodness, I ain't got nothing to do with the shootout, I'm getting out of it. You ain't gonna sit there, hey, MFer, yeah, what you shooting at me for? Yeah. No, they're gonna turn their guns at you even harder. Use those words, use all that college education that you got. You had to learn some conflict resolution along the way somewhere. Damn it. Use it properly here. Chopping back like some 5-year-old is not going to resolve the situation. And just like in that scenario that I told you, it's only going to get you mowed down even worse. Period. That's it from your boy. I got to go. Hopefully you appreciated this food for thought. We'll talk on the backside when I play some more Pixel Junk Raiders. Until next time, peace.